Senator Manchin.
Chairman Tester, thank you for holding this hearing today on quality care and patient safety for all of our veterans across the country. I've worked hard as a member of the committee to ensure that horrific murders that occurred in my home state of West Virginia and specific problems that led to these murders never happen anywhere else in the country. We must make meaningful changes at the VA so that veterans in West Virginia and across the country can begin to rebuild their trust in the VA's care. This is the first time since the Clarksburg VA murders that we are having a comprehensive look at the accountability and culture of the VA, and I thank you. I truly do. Today we'll get to talk to the Veterans Health Administration and the VA Office of Inspector General. We look forward to that. I'm also pleased that the Joint Commission is here today. As you all know, the Joint Commission, which accredits VA facilities across the country, gave Clarksburg VA a consistently passing score before and during the murders of more than 7 veterans at the facility, before and after. In fact, the Joint Commission did an on-site review at the Clarksburg VMC on May of 2017, and Clarksburg passed the review. Less than 8 weeks later, the vicious trail of veteran murders at the Clarksburg facility began. Oversight is our duty on this committee. We must hold those responsible for incidents that have placed our veterans at risk accountable, and I look forward to hearing from our panelists on how we can prevent these mistakes from occurring absolutely ever again. Dr. Clancy, later in the hearing, we're going to hear from the VA Inspector General, Mike Missel, which I had great conversations throughout this whole process, and I appreciate that. But in the written testimony, Inspector Missel states that when it comes to incidents like Clarksburg, the common contributing factors the OIG has identified are poor, inconsistent, or ineffective leadership that cultivate a complacent and disengaged medical facility culture in which the VA goal of zero patient harm is improbable, if not impossible. That's clearly the case at Clarksburg VA, and yet individuals in positions of leadership were able to simply resign and keep their valuable VA benefits like retirement benefits. I'll never forget sitting when all this was unveiled, and we learned more in the 1 week that Mr. Missel was there than we had from the administration who'd been there forever, and the head of nursing. And I looked at the head of nursing, I said, sir, with all due respect, you're either lying to me or you're totally incompetent. One of the two, but you have no right of sitting here. That was in that hearing, it was that bad. So how do we hold the VA leaders responsible when incidents like the murders at Clarksburg, how do people stay in the system? How are they able to retire with a benefit with such disrespect and such neglect and malfeasance of doing their job?
Senator, you have just said very well, and I certainly don't need to tell you what a horrific tragedy this was. And in my view, the only way we can possibly honor the experiences of those veterans and their families, I can't even imagine what it felt like to be told your loved one would be exhumed.
What are we doing to cure that so that people that would make these horribly grave mistakes and intentionally or unintentionally would be able to be benefited by doing such an incompetent job?
We have a whole new leadership team in there, as you know, and as well as a number of new nursing leaders. We have made some very concrete, specific changes in how things are done, so a nursing assistant wouldn't be able to get in and get insulin or other kinds of drugs to do the kind of horrible things.
Well, I'm saying legislation that I think we're talking, and Mr. Missel and I talked about, that allows us to subpoena those people, and if we find them in error in who are responsible, they would not get the federal pension. They're losing that for giving just such horrible treatment to our veterans. Is that accurate? We passed that, so that hopefully that should help tremendously. Also, when a quality care incident like what happened at either Clarksburg or in Arkansas occurs, how do you all apply the lessons learned after evaluating so they don't continue to repeat themselves? Is that an alert? You have a nationwide alert to all the VA hospitals and C boxes and everything else?
The lessons learned from Clarksburg and from Fayetteville were discussed widely and continue to be. And when Dr. Scavella mentioned our daily calls and when we have big leadership meetings, we start with the patient safety story. And we are talking now about tough issues that are not so easy to say in front of colleagues and things we didn't discuss, I would say, several years ago. We had a problem. We did this wrong. You all have got to pay attention because it shouldn't happen at your place. and we screwed up.
I'm just saying, when it's just inconceivable that absolute murders happened in a hospital,
I agree.
VA, intentionally,
Yes,
not by accident, intentional. More than 7, but we knew 7, we confirmed. When I was governor, we had mine disasters. It got to the point I had to close every mine down just for safety reasons until let any miner go back in that mine. Something when that atrocious happened, you would think that it would be raised to a level where you just had absolutely automatic every VA, every review process, how your nursing supervisors, the control of all of your substance and all of your medical equipment and all of your drugs, if you will. That should have been reviewed immediately through every VA. I mean, shut it down and tighten it up until it's right. That's the only thing I would say. I know my time has run out. I'll have another round, hopefully, but I thank you all for being here, and I'm glad we're finally doing this, and the country needs to know that we're not going to allow this to happen to any of our veterans anywhere in this country.
and Senator, if I might, I want to thank you and the Inspector General, because it is, these events are thankfully of this magnitude of horror rare. But it is even rarer to hold the right people accountable, and I think it's a tribute to the Inspector General, the attorneys, and yourself, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Manchin, if you have additional questions for Dr. Clancy, I would defer to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Clancy, in recent years, our veterans have experienced massive breaches of trust in all the employees, especially in Clarksburg. An employee who murdered multiple veterans at Clarksburg never went through a proper hiring process. What I'm speaking to you about is the hiring process, the need that we have, and the shortages that we're having. So how's the VA updated its hiring process to reflect basically lessons learned, vetting? They only had to make one phone call, and they could have caught this woman before she ever got in the door. So how are you doing that, and how's your retention?
We have been going through a pretty extensive human resources modernization over the past several years, and I'm happy to say that we're starting to see progress. It was not easy in the beginning, to put it mildly, because hiring is a problem, but a lot of our leaders are both reinforcing the importance of this vetting. As you say, a phone call almost certainly would have prevented this, which is unbearably painful to think about, but also coming up with ways to speed the whole process up. The pandemic allowed us to postpone some aspects of the usual hiring process, which can take a number of weeks, to bring people on rapidly because we needed that. We're now have been expressing in a hearing here last week additional flexibilities that might be helpful, and look forward to working with that committee on this. Our retention, by and large, particularly for nursing, is much better than the private sector, but we have seen it start to drop a bit, which is why we're very worried about the nursing workforce.
Let me go to the security of the cameras and holding people accountable and all that we talked about. We have a piece of legislation we've all worked together on, Chairman, myself, and others. Senate Bill 2041 is the VA Provider Accountability Act. I think you're aware of that with Senate Bill 2041. And what it would do, it would, in the VA healthcare system, by instituting requirements to keep VA and healthcare providers accountable. It's monitoring and cameras, and it will give the Office of Inspector General the tools they need to make sure when they do their investigation, they have all of real-time information. First of all, I know you all supported this legislation. Do you find it to be favorable, be helpful?
I would have to check on that. I
Okay,
honestly don't know.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'd like to get your input on that. If
Sure.
not, it's bipartisan. I think that we have a great deal of this committee that's on that piece of legislation. And I wish you would look into that to give us the support that we need to make sure you do not believe it interrupts or interferes. That's not what our purpose is. Our purpose is to make sure that we have the proper information at the proper time.
We will follow up with that.
If you would do that, I'd appreciate it. Those are all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. We'll get to our,
Senator from West Virginia, Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Chairman Moran. First of all, I want to thank Second Panel for being here. And Mr. Missile is the VA Inspector General. You and I have had a lot of conversations. And they've been vital to us, patient safety and quality care of VA, and I appreciate it very much, all your work to keep me updated, specific issues that we're facing in West Virginia. Mr. Perlin, I really appreciate you being here, and I will say this, you are the new, you were not there when all this happened. So I want to make sure we clarify that, because my remarks are not that kind to the Joint Commission after this. But you are new, and I hope that these changes will come. As you know, I'm extremely concerned about the current state of the relationship between the Joint Commission and the VA. Like I said at the beginning of this hearing, the Joint Commission consistently gave the Clarksburg VA a passing score for accreditation before and after the horrific murders occurred at the facility. The Joint Commission was even on site at the Clarksburg VA for a review, which Clarksburg passed. They passed it. That was less than 8 weeks before the murders began. That year, the VA paid the Joint Commission almost $6 million for their services. It really doesn't sit right with me, knowing the amount of money that we've invested there and the return we got. As a senator or as a West Virginian, it all comes back to accountability. It really does. And I look forward to hearing your answers to my questions. And I'll start, Mr. Perlin, with you on this question here. How did the Joint Commission miss this blatant oversight during their May 2017 on-site survey? And sir, you were not in charge at that time, and I want to clarify that again.
No, thank you, Senator. First, let me thank you for your passion around this topic. My career has largely been devoted to VA as Undersecretary for Health and otherwise. I join you with outrage and also join you in sympathy to the families of those veterans so tragically affected. I have had reason, obviously, to review the history of the Joint Commission's presence there. As I mentioned, a broad survey is sort of skims the surface. It is a vehicle for accountability. I didn't appreciate exactly how strong a vehicle for accountability it was until I personally went on a survey on the survey side this past week. And I saw that you see things that you don't see in the place you live or work. I mean, it's like your home, where you may know that I don't plug in the toaster with the coffee pot because it blows the fuse. Only this is healthcare. This is people's lives. And the Joint Commission, when we're on site, can see those sorts of things. It surveyed the broad exam of the facility in 2017, and as I understand it, that particular nurse tech was hired in 2015. It's likely that that particular chart wouldn't have come up for review. In retrospect, clearly there were HR issues, clearly there were medication management issues. When VA came back, not at the time that the Inspector General was available to evaluate in 2018, but when it found out with the rest of the public late in 2019, as I understand it, based on your passion, the passion of VA leadership, a lot of things were in place. So there's an artifact of timing. That said, I am not comfortable with the organization that can't go deeper on these sorts of
We're
issues.
hoping you make these changes. Here's a problem. If these changes don't, the Joint Commission standards and ability for surveyors to identify violations did not align with protecting patient safety. That makes me wonder why we continue to use the Joint Commission while there are several other accreditation bodies, including state surveyors through the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, that seem to have done and been able to do a better judgment for our veterans and their families. That's why I'm going to finish with this one. Has the Joint Commission ever revoked accreditation status? As you look back in the history, has that ever happened?
I am unaware that VA has revoked accreditation status. The Joint Commission has revoked VA.
Did the Joint Commission issue any corrective action for Clarksburg VA following these murders?
I believe that there were issues that were identified that would relate to the
Again,
sorts
sir,
of
I know
issues.
being new, and I say this, I appreciate you being here. If I could get more direct answers, if you could look back into that and get me more direct answers, how the Joint Commission, when Mr. Missile went there, I found out more than 7 days they were there than I found out through the whole time of the investigations.
Right. Well, the Inspector General, of course, did a very focused for-cause review, and I will find out what we had. That said, let me just make 2 points. First, we get our driver's license, and that is a demonstration of basic competencies and safety if you abide by the rules of the road. This was a malevolent individual with intent to harm. I wish I could sit here and tell you that would never happen again. It's not possible.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is that in contrast to the other accrediting bodies, the Joint Commission has a broad range of standards that go far deeper into both the culture of safety, into mechanisms of safety, and to accountability than the others.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to ask Mr. Missile one question because I have got to go vote. Mr. Missile, understanding that every incident is different, what are the standards the OIG uses when assessing and investigating VA facilities, both before and after the OIG has made findings and issued recommendations? What's your follow-up procedures before and after?
Well, the standards are we follow VHA policies and procedures and determine whether or not the facility is complying with those policies and procedures. We will on occasion make comments if we don't believe the policy or procedure is adequate. We do follow-up. We, on at least a quarterly basis, we will look at any open recommendations and work with the facility to try to close those. But again, they have to be to our satisfaction that we believe that they've met the objective and it's sustainable.
Let me just say this. Every member we have that serves on this committee is here we've chose to be on this committee because of the veterans, because of people in our family, our communities, and what they've served and sacrificed for all of us. So we care deeply. And when something happens as tragic in mine, and there's more than 7 that we know of, that's all she admitted to. We know there's more. You can only imagine looking at these families and saying, my dad was okay. He was okay 2 days ago. What happened? And there's no answers given. That's the reason that we're in this the way we are. I appreciate all of you. I don't want this to happen in New Hampshire or in Alabama. It shouldn't happen anywhere. And to go through this, so how do we prevent it? How do you hire? What's the vetting process? Locking things down, making sure. That should be recognized beforehand. I'm so sorry, they're going to cut me off here anyway, but if you want to answer very quickly, please do.
On the hiring, I think that's so critically important. There are things I learned in private sector that I wish I'd known when I had the privilege of leading VA. You indicated a tension right now between the shortages in workforce and the full vetting of an individual. Here's an approach, which is a stoplight report. Green, good credentials, clean background. Yellow, maybe some problems and competencies, maybe some problems in background, needs VISN approval. Red, absolute, dead, stop. And that can only be approved in the Undersecretary's office, the Office of the Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry for taking a little bit of privilege there.